My girlfriend lied about money while I covered all her expenses for years, so I walked away silently, and now she is begging to back. I'm a 28-year-old guy. And for the last few years, I thought love was about trust, honesty, and sharing responsibilities. I believed that if you truly cared about someone, you'd meet them halfway or at least try. Sophie came into my life at a point when I was finally settling into a steady rhythm, a stable job, a small but comfortable apartment, and a life I thought I understood. She was different from anyone I'd met, warm, funny in a dry way. But there was this underlying exhaustion in her eyes. Like the weight of life had already been pressing on her shoulders before I even knew her. When we started living together, I noticed her juggling bills, student loans, and a part-time job that barely covered rent. She never asked for help, not directly, but I could see it in the way she hesitated at the grocery store, counting coins, or how she sighed every time the utility bills arrived. I offered, and she smiled, grateful, almost relieved. I didn't think twice. Covering rent, groceries, and utilities felt like a natural part of building a life together. I even bought little things here and there, a new coffee maker, a cozy blanket she'd been eyeing, or her favorite pastries on Sunday mornings. It felt right. It felt loving. But there were small things that gnawed at me, nothing concrete at first. Sophie would casually mention money in passing, like, "I hope I can chip in more soon," or "I really need to catch up on some bills." She never gave numbers, never offered specifics, and I chalked it up to modesty or embarrassment. I thought, okay, she's stressed. Who isn't? Then one evening, as we sat on the couch, and I opened my laptop to check the budget, I realized she had quietly changed the topic whenever I tried to talk about splitting costs, joint accounts, or financial plans. She'd laugh, brush it off, or redirect the conversation to something trivial. I felt that little twinge of unease, the kind you try to ignore but can't quite shake. Something about her avoidance didn't sit right, but I pushed it aside. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first time I noticed the crack, small, almost invisible at first, but enough to make me pause and wonder if trust alone would ever be enough. For months, I threw myself into keeping our life running smoothly. I worked late nights, picked up extra freelance gigs, and made sure the apartment felt like home, warm, stocked, and comfortable. Sophie always thanked me, her smile softening the stress lines that never seemed to leave her face. At first, it felt good being needed, being the one who could shoulder the burden. I told myself this was temporary, that love sometimes meant sacrifice, and that it would all balance out eventually. But small things started to stick out. She'd ordered lunch deliveries more than usual, and when I jokingly asked, she'd laugh nervously and say, "I've had a rough morning, cut me some slack." Or she'd talk about a sale at some boutique, claiming she couldn't justify buying anything because she was short on cash. Even as she pulled out her card to grab something expensive, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that she was being honest, that I was just imagining the discrepancies. Our friends began noticing too. One evening, while we were at dinner, my buddy leaned over and whispered, "Man, she talks like she's broke, but she's always flashing new stuff." I laughed it off nervously, not wanting to accuse Sophie in public, but that seed of doubt had been planted. It was uncomfortable, like a buzzing in my chest that wouldn't go away. I tried bringing it up casually, hoping for clarity. "Hey, maybe we should sit down and go over expenses this week," I suggested one Saturday. Sophie's reaction caught me off guard. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you worry too much." "I've got it handled," she said, waving it off. The tension in her tone, subtle as it was, made my stomach twist. She didn't want to talk about money. She always had an excuse ready. That night, as I lay in bed, the apartment silent except for the faint hum of the fridge, I realized I was starting to notice patterns, little slips. Tiny contradictions, but still, I ignored the warning signs. I kept telling myself, it's fine. She's stressed. It's temporary. I didn't know then that the cracks I saw were just the surface of something. It's much deeper. It started small little things that didn't make sense at first. Sophie would mention that she had barely any money left at the end of the month. But then I'd notice her scrolling through online stores, adding shoes, clothes, or gadgets to her cart. One night, I found a delivery notice for a package I hadn't expected her name on it, a pricey set of headphones. When I asked casually, she laughed it off. "Oh, I got a gift for a friend," she said, avoiding my eyes. My chest tightened, but I let it slide. I didn't want to accuse her of anything. I wanted to trust. I started paying closer attention without letting her know. Receipts, bank notifications, random mentions in passing, it all began to form a picture I wasn't ready to face. She'd say she couldn't pay for a trip we wanted to take together. But then her social media posts showed her out at fancy cafes or buying things I didn't know she could afford. Every time I brought up splitting a bill or discussing savings, she changed the topic, laughed nervously, or distracted me with conversation. I hated that I noticed it, but I couldn't unsee the patterns. One afternoon, we were grocery shopping, and I caught her slipping an expensive bottle of wine into the cart without saying anything. I asked lightly, "Hey, didn't we agree to stick to the budget this week?" She froze for a second, then said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's nothing. I'll adjust for it next week." But the way she said it, quick, dismissive, avoiding eye contacts, set off alarms I couldn't ignore. That little unease turned into a gnawing pit in my stomach that refused to go away. Even my friends started noticing. A coworker commented one day, "Man, you cover so much. Are you sure she's honest with you about money?" I laughed nervously, brushing it off, but the thought lingered. Every time I saw Sophie, part of me wanted to confront her, to ask outright about her finances, but another part feared the answer. That night, lying in bed while Sophie fell asleep beside me, I felt a strange mix of love and suspicion. Her breathing was calm, her face peaceful. And yet I couldn't shake the feeling that she was keeping something from me, something big. I closed my eyes, hoping it was nothing, but deep down, I knew the unease wasn't going away. I finally decided to bring it up carefully, cautiously. One evening we were sitting on the couch, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the room. "Sophie," I started, trying to keep my voice even, "can we talk about finances? I want to make sure we're on the same page." She looked at me, and for a split second I saw hesitation flicker across her face. Then she smiled, warm and calm, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, don't worry about it, love. I've got it handled," she said, dismissing me with a hand wave. Leaning back into the cushions, as if the conversation had never happened, I swallowed hard, trying not to let the anxiety show. Her avoidance gnawed at me, though. It wasn't just a little slip this time. She was actively steering away from anything that would make her accountable. I remember the feeling vividly, that tightening in my chest, like my trust was stretching thin, a rope fraying in places I couldn't see. I wanted to believe her so badly that I nodded and said, "Okay, just checking." But inside, doubt had already taken root. A few days later, I found an unfamiliar credit card statement slipped under a stack of mail. My heart sank when I glanced at the charge, this multiple large transactions I didn't know about. I confronted her gently, trying to stay calm. "Sophie, I just found this statement. Can you help me understand it?" She laughed nervously, brushing it off. "Oh, that's nothing. Just some bills I forgot to tell you about." "Really? It's fine." Her eyes darted away, and the corners of her mouth twitched. That moment, more than anything, made me feel the weight of deceit. Even if she wasn't outright lying, it was hiding omission, twisting facts to keep me in the dark. The apartment felt smaller that night. The hum of the fridge, the faint ticking of the wall clock, Sophie's quiet breathing, it all felt heavy, oppressive. I lay in bed beside her, pretending to sleep, but my mind raced, replaying receipts, statements, and conversations. She was lying, or at least withholding the truth, and I couldn't decide if I was angry, hurt, or just disappointed. I didn't know then that this was just the beginning. Something bigger was lurking, something that would make every small doubt, every skipped explanation, every hidden charge, pale in comparison. And I could already feel the moment coming when I would have to face it one way or another. I never expected the truth to hit me like this. It started innocuously, an offhand comment from one of her friends during a group hangout. Sophie had excused herself to take a call, and her friend leaned over and whispered, "Wow, can't believe you've been pretending you're broke all this time. That guy's paying for everything, right?" My stomach dropped. My hands went clammy, and for a second I couldn't breathe. Pretending she was broke? I wanted to yell, to storm out, to demand answers, but I stayed frozen, gripping my drink like it was a lifeline. Later that night, I confronted her quietly at home. "Sophie, I overheard something today," I said, voice low, controlled, but every word trembling inside me. "You've been lying about money? About what you earn? About what you have?" She froze, eyes wide for a brief flash, and then laughing nervously, she tried to explain. "I didn't want to stress you out. I thought it would be easier if you didn't know." Easier? Easier for who? Exactly? My chest ached from betrayal, my heart pounding, not from anger alone, but from disbelief. I sank onto the couch, silent, letting her words hit me like stones. Years of covering bills, groceries, utilities, even little luxuries, every sacrifice I made. Every late night grinding away to make sure our life felt stable and loving was built on a lie. She'd been hiding significant savings, a personal income, maybe even assets, while letting me carry the entire financial weight. And the casual way she justified it, the ease with which she tried to normalize deceit, made me feel small, manipulated, and utterly foolish. I remember the apartment feeling colder that night, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint buzzing from my laptop. The soft tick of the wall clack, all of it seemed louder than usual, as if mocking me. I stared at her, trying to read her expression, searching for remorse, for shame, for any hint that she realized what she'd done. But she just looked at me, eyes wide, waiting for forgiveness. As if her explanation alone was enough, I sat there, paralyzed. The love I had felt so pure, so giving, clashed violently with the crushing betrayal I now understood. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. My trust had been weaponized, my kindness exploited. I didn't know how I would respond yet, but I knew one thing: for certain things could never go back to the way they were. Something had to change. After that night, I started withdrawing slowly, silently, almost imperceptibly. I didn't confront Sophie immediately. I didn't yell, I didn't throw accusations around. Instead, I let my actions speak. I stopped covering little extras, started keeping a tighter watch on our shared finances, and gradually pulled back from the emotional labor I'd been doing for years. I didn't announce it, I just let her feel the distance, subtle but unmistakable. She noticed it immediately, of course. Sophie started asking questions, casual ones at first, like, "Hey, did you forget to pay the electric bill? Or did you really cancel the delivery?" Her tone was light, almost teasing, but I could sense the edge of worry creeping in. She was testing me, trying to figure out what had changed. I played along, keeping my calm, my tone even, giving nothing away. Internally, I was a storm. Part of me was seething with anger, every lie and omission replaying like a brutal montage. Another part was painfully sad. Years of devotion and trust had been funneled into someone who hadn't earned it. I thought about all the late nights working overtime, all the weekends I spent fixing things around our apartment or running errands so she wouldn't have to stress. And now, those sacrifices felt hollow, exploited. I still kept living with her, still smiled, still made dinner sometimes, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. Every touch, every conversation, every laugh felt rehearsed on my part, a mask to hide the sharp disappointment I felt. I wanted her to feel the shift, to sense the walls going up without understanding why. The tension between us became almost tangible, like a thick fog in the apartment. One night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I noticed her phone light up with notifications, and she quickly tucked it away. A guilty little twitch of her fingers betraying her. My stomach sank. She thinks she's still in control, I realized. But for the first time, I understood that the game had changed. I was no longer a passive player. And somewhere in the quiet tension of that room, I felt a strange, bitter satisfaction knowing that she would eventually feel the weight of what she had done. Even if I didn't say a word, by this point, the distance between us was unmistakable. I was there physically, but emotionally, I had checked out. Every morning, I brewed coffee, packed my lunch, and nodded at Sophie as if nothing had changed. But inside, a cold clarity had settled over me. I stopped anticipating her needs, stopped covering for little mishaps. I stopped filling the gaps she once relied on me to handle. The apartment, once warm and bustling with the illusion of shared responsibility, felt quiet, almost sterile, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Sophie noticed, of course. She began testing boundaries, more openly asking for money for random things, hoping I'd slip back into old patterns. "Hey, can you cover this?" She'd say casually, as if our shared history gave her the right. And every time I hesitated before answering, letting the silence stretch longer than comfortable. I could see her confusion, that little flicker of panic in her eyes when I didn't immediately respond. It was subtle. But I felt a grim satisfaction in watching her realize I was no longer her safety net. I started documenting everything expenses I had covered, dates of purchases, little lies she had told. At first it felt obsessive, but then it became almost therapeutic, like reconstructing a crime scene of betrayal. Every receipt, every bank statement, every tiny contradiction painted the same picture. She had been taking advantage of my trust and generosity for years, manipulating my love into labor and sacrifice. One evening, she tried to corner me with a sudden crisis, a supposed urgent expense she needed covered. I didn't react the way she expected. I leaned back, measured my words, and said quietly, "I'm not going to do this for you." Her face went pale, confusion and shock flickering in her eyes. I didn't need to yell. The silence between us was louder than any accusation. Lying in bed that night, listening to her restless pacing in the living room, I realized something chilling. For the first time, she had no control over me. And for the first time in years, I felt a strange mix of empowerment and sorrow, knowing that the reckoning was coming, but I wasn't done observing, not yet. I hit my breaking point one Friday night. Sophie had asked me again to cover some emergency expense, a spontaneous trip she had taken with friends, something I hadn't signed off on. I could feel every fiber of my patience unraveling. My chest tightened, my hands shook slightly, and I realized I was exhausted, not physically, but emotionally. Years of giving, of sacrificing, of bending over backward had left me raw and hollow. And yet the cruelest part was how casually she seemed to expect it. As if my devotion was a given, not a choice. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, the dim overhead light casting sharp shadows across the counters. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. I thought about all the money I had spent on groceries, bills, dinners, little luxuries I'd convinced myself were love investments. And suddenly, the weight of it all hit me like I had been carrying a boulder on my back for years, only to realize the person I loved had been using it as a step stool. I remember dialing a friend and barely holding back tears. "I don't know what to do anymore," I admitted, voice tight, broken. "I feel like I've been played, like every sacrifice I made was invisible. They didn't offer solutions, what could they? I just needed someone to hear me, to acknowledge the betrayal I was living with every day." Later, Sophie came into the kitchen casually asking, "Everything okay?" Her tone was light, unaware, or pretending to buff the storm inside me. I looked at her and felt a mix of anger, heartbreak, and numbness. For a fleeting moment, I wanted to scream, to throw everything at her, to make her see, really see, how much she had taken. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I walked away to the bedroom, letting the silence swallow us both. That night, lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized the depth of what I was facing. I loved her, yes, but that love had been weaponized against me. And in that realization, bitter and painful, I also saw the first glimmer of clarity. I would have to protect myself, even if it meant walking away. But how do you leave someone you love when everything inside you is screaming betrayal? The decision didn't come with a dramatic confrontation. I didn't storm out yelling. I didn't slam doors. I simply began preparing quietly, systematically. I moved my personal belongings into my car over the course of a week, packed essentials, organized bank accounts, and made sure every financial responsibility I could control was settled. Every action was deliberate, precise, so lent a quiet rebellion against the years of exploitation. Sophie noticed the change immediately, of course. She started asking questions, trying to gauge my mood. "Hey, did you forget the water bill?" she'd say lightly. "Or are you mad at me?" I kept my tone neutral, letting the silence stretch longer than comfortable. Her brows furrowed, her lips twitched nervously. She could feel the shift, and it unsettled her. For the first time, she wasn't in control. I remember the last night in the apartment vividly. The air smelled faintly of coffee and the remnants of dinner I hadn't eaten. The city lights filtered softly through the blinds, painting streaks across the floor. Sophie was scrolling on her phone, glancing up occasionally, unaware that I was quietly boxing up the last of my things. When she finally looked over and asked, "Are you really going to sleep in your car tonight?" I just nodded without explanation. The words didn't need to be said. The morning I left, I kissed her forehead lightly as she slept. Her phone lit up with notifications from friends, work, messages from me I hadn't yet deleted. She stirred, eyes fluttering open, confusion and sleep blending together. I didn't say a word. I just walked out, suitcase in hand, and closed the door behind me, driving away. I felt a strange mix of relief and lingering sadness. Relief that the manipulation and lies were finally behind me, but sadness for the years of love and effort that had been quietly taken. And somewhere deep in my chest, simmering certainty formed. She would realize what she had lost, but by then, it would be too late. It didn't take long before the messages started. At first, it was subtle. A text here, a call there. "Hey, can we talk?" Or "I just want to explain." I didn't respond. I let them sit unread, while the days stretched into a week. Then they escalated. Long, rambling apologies, confessions of mistakes, promises that she would change, offers to repay what she had taken to prove she could be trusted. I read them all, my chest tight, my hands shaking a little, but I didn't answer. Every word she sent only reminded me of years of betrayal. Friends warned me it would be hard, that seeing her messages might pull me back, that she would twist my emotions. And I won't light hurt to read them. Part of me still remembered the laughter, the comfort, the moments I had loved her with everything I had. But the other part, the part that had been betrayed, manipulated, used, was stronger. That part kept me grounded, kept me silent. One evening, her desperation became almost palpable. She called repeatedly, leaving voice messages that were frantic but polite. "Please, just meet me. Let me explain. I can fix this, I swear," she pleaded, her voice breaking in a way I hadn't heard before. The words cut through me, but not in a way that softened me. They were a reminder of power lost. I sat in my apartment listening, feeling the quiet satisfaction of finally being untouchable by her manipulations. She even tried showing up at places she knew I would be: cafes, my workplace, friends' gatherings, always with that pleading smile, that hope that I would let her back in. And every time, I kept my composure, refusing to make eye contact, refusing to respond. The control she once had over me was gone, and the panic in her expression grew with every attempt. That night, I thought about everything: the money, the lies, the constant small betrayals, and I realized something. I didn't need to confront her, didn't need to justify myself. Silence was more powerful than any words I could speak. And deep down, I knew she was beginning to understand, finally, what she had lost. When I finally agreed to meet her, it wasn't because I wanted to hear her apologies. It was because I wanted her to see the reality she'd created. We met at a quiet cafe, one of those places with low lighting and empty corners that make everything feel intimate. Sophie arrived first, smiling nervously, fidgeting with her hands. She expected tears, begging, maybe even reconciliation. She didn't get any of that. I sat down across from her, keeping my tone calm, measured. "Sophie," I began, "do you know why I agreed to meet you?" Her lips parted slightly, and I could see the flicker of hope in her eyes. I wanted to explain," she stammered. I shook my head, cutting her off gently but firmly. "No, I didn't come here to hear your excuses. I came so you could understand exactly what you did. I laid it all out, the years of covering, bills, groceries, utilities, the little luxuries. Every sacrifice she had taken for granted. I showed her receipts, statements, timelines, everything meticulously documented. I watched as her expression changed, the confident, casual demeanor melting into something closer to panic. Her eyes darted around, searching for a way out. And that's when it hit. Mishi had no escape from the truth now. I loved you, I said quietly. My voice steady but filled with weight, and I trusted you. I supported you, and you. You lied, you manipulated, and you used me. She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly, trying to explain, but I let the silence hang, heavy and suffocating. The words I didn't say spoke louder than any apology she could offer. She broke down in the corner of that quiet cafe, pleading, begging, crying in a way that was both pitiful and telling. I didn't move. I didn't respond. I didn't give her the closure she wanted. The power had shifted, and for the first time in years, I felt an overwhelming sense of calm and control. She had expected a desperate reaction, but I gave her none. Only truth. Only quiet justice. After that meeting, I didn't respond to her messages anymore. I didn't need to. I didn't block her immediately. I let the silence do the work. Each day that passed without a word from me was a reminder of the power I had reclaimed, the control she no longer had. She tried reaching out to friends, sending long explanations and apologies, but I stayed silent. I let her realize, on her own, that the person she had manipulated, the person she had taken for granted, was no longer there. I started rebuilding my life intentionally, without her shadow lingering over me. Weekends felt lighter, mornings felt calmer. Even mundane tasks, like making my own coffee, paying my bills, doing my laundry, became affirmations of independence. I wasn't bitter or angry anymore. I was free. Free from lies, free from manipulation, free from the constant drain of giving without reciprocity. And the strange thing was, the freedom didn't feel empty. It felt like coming home to myself for the first time in years. Months later, I heard through mutual friends that Sophie had tried every Thinkles. Messages even showing up at places she knew I frequented, but I never engaged. I heard that she was finally starting to understand the consequences of her actions. That people were beginning to see patterns she had hidden from everyone, just as I had. It didn't feel like revenge exactly, but it was deeply satisfying. Justice, in its quietest, most effective form, had been served. The last message I ever received from her was a long, pleading text, asking for one more chance, asking for explanation, even asking for help. I read it once, let it sit on my phone for a moment, and then deleted it. No response. No engagement. Just peace. I didn't destroy her. She did that to herself with her lies. I simply walked away, and as I sit here now, in my apartment, sunlight spilling across the floor, I finally feel it, light, calm, and the profound clarity that comes from knowing you chose yourself over deception. I didn't just leave high, reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my peace. And that, more than anything, is priceless.